You as the leader need to build that trust. And sometimes that goes back to the over communicating. You say like, hey, is 30 days going to be enough for you? And if they say yes, then okay, hey, you said you could do it in 30 days. Boom. Here's the deadline. And they may say no. And that goes back to they feel empowered. They feel ownership because, oh man, Kyle, Chad, they're actually asking me, what do I think? How long do I actually need for that? And you'll find most times that, well, you think, and it's scary as a leader, oh, they're gonna pad it and they're gonna say they need more time. They'll actually probably say they need less time. And I found a lot of times that's what people do. Or when they put that deadline, they may pad the deadline a little bit, but then they end up delivering faster, like a lot faster than if you tell them what the deadline is.
Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the KB Article. I'm Chad Brown, along with my co-host Kyle Kintzler with
Hello.
Kintzler Brown. And we've got joining us today Phillip Sessions with Speaking Sessions. I've known Phillip for a little bit. He's a friend of mine, helped me out doing some business stuff. But Phillip is an expert at communications, and our goal here is to optimize the growth and financial well-being of those we serve, whether it be our clients, our employees, our community, or whatever. And part of doing that requires real communication and hitting the emotional triggers of your audience and different variations. So Phillip is an expert at that. So without further ado, just welcome Phillip to the show. Phillip, you with us, brother?
Hey guys, thanks for having me.
How are you?
Yeah.
So, great to have you on board here today, Phil.
I'm good. How are you?
It's great. It's great. I was like, I understand that you're out in South Carolina. That's one of my favorite places in the world out there. Tell us exactly, where are you out there, Phil?
Yeah, I'm in the Greenville, South Carolina area.
Okay. Now, is that in proximity to Charleston, Columbia? Where's that at?
No. Yeah, so it's what we call the upstate of South Carolina. So it's kind of near Clemson University, if you will. So right there, I call it the arm. It's definitely not the armpit. It's probably the better part of the state, but I call it the armpit because it's kind of up here in like the top corner of all of South Carolina, and I'm definitely making a terrible South Carolina symbol there. But it's near Georgia, it's near North Carolina, close to Tennessee. So you can definitely get places. And it was interesting moving out here from Texas because you go 15 hours to get all the way across one way and 18 the other way. And then I came here and people are like, oh, we're going to go to Tennessee or North Carolina or Georgia, go out of state for the weekend on a 2-day weekend. And wait, you're going to go out of state? What are you talking about? Only to find out, it was like an hour or 2-hour drive. So it really wasn't that big of a deal.
That's interesting, man. I think I may have told you this in the past. I actually have an office in Malden, just south of Greenville. Yeah. We were in Greenville for a while, and then we got a place down in Malden. So, yeah, it's up in the northwest corner, right at the foothills, right, of the mountains, right?
Beautiful.
Yeah,
area.
We call them the foothills. Yeah, Malden's real close to me as well.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, hey,
I'm very excited to have you on here today there, Phillip. So I think you've got a lot of good substance and a lot of good things that we like to, of value. And I think we can, you'd certainly be able to offer some perspectives on some things and help ourselves and our listeners out and those types of things. And just as a reminder, if the audience that's out there, if you like what you hear and we try to do the best that have good guests and have good conversations here. And if you like what you hear, let us know. And then if you would share it with a friend, let them know. If there are things that we can improve on, let us know so we can, and if there's topics that you'd like to listen on or something that maybe you're struggling with or whatever. So we can certainly dive into those things, with separate guests and stuff like that. But we're very encouraged to have you here with us today, Phillip. And what kind of brought you in with being the, public speaking, which is something that most people, one of the biggest fears that people have in life outside of probably death is public speaking, right? And I mean, it's right up there. And most people, they don't even like to talk about it. It's kind of like taxes too, it's just, you just don't want to do that. But you decided to kind of specialize in that. And what kind of brought you about and say, hey, this is something that I see that there's such a need out there for it. And is this something that you were naturally good at, or was this something that you kind of had to build upon over time? Or what was that moment that you said, hey, this is what I'm going to do?
Yeah, I was not naturally good at speaking. I used to mumble and I would barely move my lips whenever I spoke when I was growing up and everything. And I was terrified to talk in front of anybody. So I came from a background of not wanting to talk, wanting to be the center of attention and get in front of everybody. But as I got into self-development, that's where this desire came out, because I realized all the greats that we saw, the Grant Cardones, the Ed Milet's, the Andy Frizellas, all of these guys, they had this one thing in common, is that they could communicate a message very well. And on top of that, they were on stages. And really where it started changing for me was GrowthCon 2. And I think that was 2017, 2018, something like that. It was like 2016 or 2017, somewhere in there. GrowthCon 2 in Las Vegas, where I found that these guys were on the stage speaking and they were able to get a message out to the masses, and just how cool it was to see these guys on stage being able to do something that looked like a lot of fun. I didn't think it was going to be near as crazy or as difficult as it was now being on this side of it all. But I realized I wanted to be that guy like that, or because that was somebody that could be influential. And to me, speaking is where you create the most influence in your life. And it's probably one of the most highest paid things to date right now. I think Andy Frizella is now up to like $300,000 for a 45 minutes to an hour speech. I mean, that's crazy to think about. Of course, he puts a lot of time into it, but you get paid $300,000 for an hour. Pretty crazy. And so you've got Gary Vaynerchuk and Ed Milet that are like 100,000, but they're wanting to be on more stages speaking, so their fees a little bit lower. And so there's that money side, but more than anything, it's just really the influence and impact that you can create on the mass scale by being able to speak well and speak on stage. And that's what really got me into it, because I wanted to be like those guys.
Right. How do you think that would kind of, as business owners and leaders within organizations, maybe we have a smaller crowd and maybe we just kind of have to, that we're ones that would influence, 5, 10, 30, 100 people within our organization. How does that kind of, how does that, your speaking, how does that help you, in that situation, and how you communicate with, let's say, people that you deal with every day?
That's a great question. And I'm sure, I know for sure, Chad, you're married. And so you probably had plenty of conversations with your wife, like I have had, where you say something, assuming that she knew everything that you already know, and that conversation goes bad. And that same thing happens in our business. And there's an organization called SHRM, which is a HR management organization. And they say for small businesses, poor communication costs about $4,200 a year per individual. So you think, okay, one person on your team, $4,200, that's not a lot. But when you think about it, that's about $350 a month that it costs you just for poor communication. And you talk about if you've got 100 people in your business, you're talking about almost $500,000 that you're losing a year due to communication alone. And we've all had a meeting to talk about a meeting, to have a follow-up meeting on that previous meeting. And that's all because of poor communication. So when we talk about communication and speaking and how vital it is, not just from a monetary perspective, but the fact that you can lose out on jobs, you spend so much money going to several meetings, you can end up thinking that you're thinking one way and the client's thinking another way, and now y'all have miscommunicated and you're missing deadlines, and just frustration happens from that. And so communication is vital for us, especially as small business owners, because we are the face of that company. And so our message, there's so many different things we can go into. And so maybe I won't go into all of them right now. And maybe y'all could kind of bring some of these out. But I mean, it goes to you being the face of the company, you just communicating with your team members. So that way, if you're on the same page and everything. And so really having that solid communication and being able to take the information that's up here in your mind and transfer it out is so important that so many people miss out on. They want to focus on fun things like marketing or business and business development and stuff like that, sales versus speaking. And y'all know that all too well with taxes. Nobody wants to focus on that until they have to. And it's the same thing with speaking and communicating, or very similar, where nobody wants to talk about it or do anything about it until they realize they've got this bleeding business money coming out, because they're constantly having to go back and talk through things over and over again, just like the IRS coming to them.
And I think we all, and as business owners, we struggle with that, and especially during your infancy, right? And another topic that we're going to kind of talk about a little bit more here is the delegation, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what we're talking about. And I identify with it virtually every day, with the employees, kind of identifying, if every idea that we had that we could just tell our employees to do and it would be done that particular way, boy, business would be good. And they always say, well, why didn't we think of that? Well, we have, but we have to execute what it is that we're trying to portray here. So that comes down to the delegation, and then inspecting what we're expecting, but then really laying out what it is that we want to accomplish with this, with this initiative that we're trying to do. And that's it's more of an art, than anything, so not to get out ahead of ourselves, and we can come back up to that delegating, but I want to talk a little bit more about that. I think you have a lot to offer there, Phillip.
Hey, Phillip, before we jump into that, you mentioned something that kind of stood out to me, is that we have the meeting to talk about the meeting that was because of the meeting that, right? So part of this whole communication cycle is maybe having a structured communication process within, at least organizational wide, when you're not talking about getting on stage or presenting to a group or in a setting where you're just speaking and maybe taking some questions, but within your business, having a communication structure or plan, right, to avoid some of that. And part of good communication is limiting communication to a certain extent, sounds like.
Yeah, for sure. So when you think about meetings, just to give an example here for you, have an agenda. It sounds silly, but you're going to look more prepared, especially if you're going in and speaking with your team. They want to have that vision. And this is what I found out with business ownership, with leading teams, is that more people are not like us. Like us as entrepreneurs, we're very much like, hey, just tell me where you want me to go. I'll figure it out. I don't need you to give me every step, from A to Z. Just tell me and I'll figure it out from there. Most people are not wired that way. And so therefore they need some kind of structure. And so when you go into a meeting, have an agenda of, hey, these are the 3 points we're going to talk about. And EOS goes into this a lot too, about how your meeting structure should be. And so you talk about those things. But when people bring up something, what will help you to keep the meeting on task is, okay, somebody brings something out of left field. Cool. Catch it like baseball, look at it, acknowledge it. And if it matches with the meeting, if it's something we're going to talk about in the meeting, great. If it's not, like, hey, let's set that down. I'll make a note of that and we'll talk about it later. But too often we want to go down these rabbit holes, and that's what gets us sidetracked, and we never actually get anything done for that meeting. And so we have to have that meeting to have a meeting. So really just setting agenda, some kind of structure there, and just talk about it for the first 5 minutes of a meeting will make your meetings go so much better.
Yeah. My grandpa, and then I kind of story, and I think I might have shared this on a podcast that we did recently, but both of my grandfathers were preachers, right? And one had the philosophy of get up, speak up, and shut up. The other one said, I'm going to speak till 12. And that's when church gets out. It didn't matter if he was saying the same thing 3 or 4 times. My dad had that same philosophy, get up, speak up, and shut up. So more isn't always better, right?
No.
So
more definitely is not better.
Yeah. So, and I love this conversation because I know we can adapt a lot of that within our organization as well. I'm sure all the listeners could make some tweaks as well, but kind of talk to us a little bit before we get into more of delegation and all of that stuff, really focused on communication. How do you or speaking sessions, your business, come in and partner with someone like us, a small organization where we have 10 to 20 employees? It fluctuates because we have some seasonality to some of our businesses, but what does that look like for someone that might be interested in saying, you know what, I'm spending so much time talking, I feel like nobody's listening, or I have to repeat myself over and over again to get the same, the same result. Uh, what do you do to help businesses solve that?
Yeah, so what I like to do is come into a business and really talk with the top leadership, the senior leadership, or the business owner, depending on how your structure is set up there, and really figure out, hey, what is your vision? Where are you trying to go? And what is this point that you're trying to get across? And I found a lot of times that even the business owners, they got this idea in their head, but they don't know how to bring it out. So I help bring that out. And then as we go through and work through their meetings, we go through and talk about, hey, how can we set up meeting agendas? How can we make sure that you're speaking properly and communicating in a way that people understand that vision and know what their part is in that? And I found with leaders as well that they won't really explain what the person does, their part within the company and the overall vision. But when you do this, employees and your team members, they'll actually want to work with you more because they can see themselves in the company. They can see where their job actually helps. It's not just, oh, I'm a bean counter, or I'm just checking boxes or anything like that. Like, I actually have an importance in the company. So I go and make sure that I figure out what the vision is for that business owner or the executive team, and then help them be able to go present that and communicate that. But then I also go in and talk with the team as somebody who is a third party that's non-biased, and talk with them and see what shortcomings they feel that leadership has, because they can talk with somebody like me where they don't feel like they can talk to that owner or the executive team, and then get that feedback from them, and then go back to the leadership team and then talk with them about that too. And like, hey, and I won't say like, hey, Joe or Sally over here said this thing, like, here's the feedback that I collected, and here's some things, and start working on a strategy from there for them to be able to work on that executive team. But then also, when I'm in those calls or those talks with the team members, I do talk with them and then give them some advice too on, hey, how can you bring this up to the leadership? Because there are times where when we are an employee, when we're not in a leadership position, we do have to lead up. So how do we do that? And then also give that feedback without feeling like we're going to get fired because we disagreed with the leadership team.
Yeah. No, and that's excellent. And in fact, I've got, and I was just writing down some notes while you were saying that. We have our marketing initiative that we have, and we assembled the team here Monday and kind of, wrote down, what, this is what our particular roles are going to be, and then following up. And I really like that idea. I do need to send out a follow-up email to that meeting and say, this is what the expectations were ahead of time, and then coming to the table. But I think it really kind of got everybody assembled, now that we kind of identified what the initiative is, and then identified what each other's roles are going to be, and then coming back, it was really exciting to see how everybody was, how excited that everybody was that they had their own ownership, and this is what they were supposed to be doing. Now, when they do that, is that now if you're one of 5 people within the organization with part of this initiative, and you don't do maybe what we're supposed to do, and that's really up to us as the owners within the organization, and with that committee that we're putting together, identify this is what the purpose of it is, because you got to have certainty, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to know what it is. We can't be accountable to one another if we're not certain of what it is that we're supposed to be trying to execute, right? So
yeah.
That, I guess that's kind of where we really need to get things really, really spelled out, and really taking hold and going to that next level with things there. So it's very, very relevant to what you're saying there, Phillip. So your timing was wonderful. So
you mentioned a great point there. Sorry, Chad. You mentioned a great point there about accountable. When you give them that ownership, it makes them feel bought into the company and the vision of the company. But then it's also something you can hold them accountable to as well. And so I'll speak to those that maybe they're thinking about starting a business, or maybe they're in a spot that they aren't leading yet. One thing that you can do to then go back and help your leadership team and hold them accountable, or the business owner, whatever that situation looks like, after the meeting, and you mentioned this a little bit, Kyle, is that send a follow-up email. Hey, here's the things that we talked about, which is all a part of great communication. Is, okay, here's the follow-up email, here's the notes from the meeting, and this is what we talked about. And then you can even say at the end, like, hey, if this is what my understanding was, and here's what we talked about. And that gives the other person that time to be able to say, oh, no, that's not what I meant, or, oh, no, I don't remember that. But now you've got something that you have got that paper trail saying, here's what we talked about, here's what we agreed upon. And if they don't respond to it, that's the email trail versus, oh, I think I remember us talking about this, or we talked about it, but I don't remember it that way. Now it's hearsay versus, hey, it's in writing. So make sure that you are doing those meeting notes or meeting minutes and sending those out afterwards, whether you are the leader or just the employee.
Right. And that's something that, like I said, I have to get that done today. It's one of the biggest things that there is out there, because if I just went from that meeting and I go into a week later to the next meeting, you know that about 70 or 80% of what we talked about isn't going to get done, or it never really took that traction, right? Especially after the first one, because it usually takes a little bit of time and say, okay, this is what we had talked about, and this is what we were supposed to do, but that didn't happen. Now, here's another reminder of this is supposed to happen. But if we can be proactive, and now we have that follow-up, and then we go into the next meeting, and then we say, this is what we're going to talk about, and this is what the action plan was, and this is what you kind of said that you would be doing for the organization here. Boy, then what are the chances that they're that much more prepared and that they're going to execute it, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. Good stuff.
So, I mean, we've been talking about delegation essentially, without saying the word, and which is great because you brought that up. That's something that you kind of focus on, but the importance of communication and setting expectations. And I'll be honest, I have a weakness. Sometimes I communicate something in passing or whatever, and I have an expectation of a certain result. But then, back in maybe a few years ago, I might have reacted a little bit differently and said, hey, this was the expectation. You were told to do this, and why isn't it done? Now I kind of catch myself, because ultimately we as leaders are the owner. We need to communicate effectively, whether that's saying it once, communicating it via email for follow-up, or whatever. Is there a certain system that you recommend implementing to make sure you are adhering to that communication? Or Kyle, you got something to add to that?
Yeah, like what do you do? Because I hear it from both sides, and we have to identify what is the difference between micromanaging somebody and monitoring somebody. Because if you ask 10 people, they're a lot of people, they'll say that that's what's called micromanaging. That's what micromanaging is. No, not necessarily. Micromanager to me is kind of like being there on top of them all the time, every day, every little aspect. Is where if you're monitoring somebody, it's identifying what role that they have, setting what the expectation is, and for 100% fact that I'm going to follow up on that. And I think most of our employees now, they know I'm going to follow up on that. And if you don't follow up on it, then things just kind of go by the wayside. I think oftentimes you get accused of being micromanaging when you're just monitoring them. So it becomes kind of an unpopular position as owners, because we are monitoring them. But that is that's what we need to be doing. And then when we monitor too, it's like that's really not where we wanted that to be, right? And this is more like, I think this is where we want to get at, and then we can kind of guide that ship and continue to grow. So.
Yeah, I think as business owners, we're not comfortable with creating KPIs, key performance indicators, and that's definitely something I am not very great at doing. So we're not going to talk about that too much. But essentially, we're creating key performance indicators for our employees and everything. And so, Chad, kind of going back to your question, what I would do is have it whether it be a weekly or a monthly or every other week cadence, but have some kind of cadence where y'all can check in and everything, because people do want to have some autonomy where they can go do their work and they're not like, hey, the boss is over my shoulder or anything. But at the same time, you as the business owner, you start getting heartburn because you're like, oh man, I'm spending all this money on this employee.
Yeah.
I don't know what they're doing. I don't know what's going on. So just going in, and I really call it over communicating, because it feels like we're just communicating too much. And just to kind of give an example here, one time that with my wife and I, obviously not huge stakes here, but we had this ant infestation, and there was ants at the dog food bowl. And so we have dog food, like the bowl where it's like next in our breakfast nook. Then we have dog food that's in the laundry room. And so I said, oh, it's by the dog food. And my wife was like, oh my gosh, there's ants at the dog food bowl later on, after I'd already told her, hey, there's ants at the dog food. And she thought I meant the dog food in the laundry room, not the dog food bowl. So simply that one extra word would have helped us be able to understand that. And so, and you mentioned this, like in passing, we say, hey, I need you to get this done. And so our expectation when I say get this done, like, hey, I need you to do this today. Well, in their mind, I'll get it done this week. No big deal. I got a couple more days in the week, right, and I'll get it done. Well, we didn't clearly communicate that expectation. And so that's why I say over communicate and really explain that. Because if I'd have added one more word, the bowl for dog food bowl, that would have helped my wife understand that I already knew the answer there. And then same thing for us. If we would just say, hey, don't just get this done. Hey, I need this done today. And it's like, oh my gosh, expectations are met then, because now I've told them specifically. So we need to make sure that we're really over communicating, because everything in our head, nobody else can read. And I know we wish our spouses could read our minds. I know as men, we oftentimes have to try and interpret things. What does it mean when they're tired, or, I'm hungry, and you got to figure out what restaurant they want to go to and everything. But we need to just over communicate and really make sure we just say everything. And if you feel like you're almost talking down to somebody sometimes, that's really at the point where you're starting to communicate enough. But secondly, if you are afraid that you're talking down to them and like talking to them like they're a kid or something, you can even say like, hey, I just want to make sure that I'm giving you all the information. Please let me know if I'm not giving you enough information, or if I'm explaining too much. I'm happy to not explain as much, but I just want to make sure that I do share everything that you need to be able to get your job done successfully. And so that's kind of the way I navigate a lot of these conversations, especially when it comes to delegation, is really just making sure that everything is clear cut. I've over communicated it. I've given them every expectation. And it's really kind of comes down to almost like creating a standard operating procedure. You have to really think through, okay, what are all these steps that need to actually happen? What is all the information that I need to know before I can successfully do a job? Because most people aren't like us, the business owners, where we'll just figure it out. We'll get whatever resources we'll need. We'll go talk to people and get it done. Most people are going to sit there until they get all the resources, until they're told what to do next. So we have to almost micromanage, but what feels like micromanagement to us, which is having a weekly cadence or a monthly cadence where we're kind of checking in or holding you accountable to certain things, checking in what's going on, that's not micromanagement to most people. Micromanagement to most people is where like every single day, every single hour, you're constantly saying, hey, where are you at with this? Are you almost done with this? And just constantly bombarding them, and they feel like they can't get their work done. They feel like they don't have any room to breathe or anything. That's true micromanagement. Although for us, as business owners, as visionaries, if we had somebody coming to us and wanted to have a weekly meeting on something, we'd be up the wall crazy. Like, dude, I'm going to get it done. Don't worry about it. So our micromanagement is different than actual micromanagement. What we feel like micromanagement is.
No, that's fantastic. Good points. And something that we do in our organization too is that we'll bring the whole team together. If not, during the summer anyway, since usually, we're in the tax and the bookkeeping side. So things, they do tend to slow down a little bit in the off season or whatever. But oftentimes if we're not communicating enough, or let's just say we're just kind of going upon our business and 4 weeks, 6 weeks go by and we're not kind of, what is going on? We really made it a point to make sure that we were having a meeting, and we called it a cascade effect. So basically you're taking streams of information and diluting that all the way down to the lowest level, so you know what is going on within the organization. And I think that really kind of helps solidify organization, because if we came together every couple of weeks, we go around and, and say, and call out people for all the good things that were going on, and, go around the room, part of the EOS system, basically, out there doing shout outs and those types of things. It really, really helped gel the team, and it identified that this is what you're doing over here. This is what you're doing over here. We've got, numerous different businesses that are kind of going on at the same time. And everybody needs to know what their role is within the organization. And without that communication, without keeping people accountable going forward, it just kind of gets a little bit loose, right? So you get a little bit playing being comfortable. And but it really kind of helped to refocus. So that was good. And my son, we brought him in the organization this last year, and he kind of travels around the country with visiting a lot of offices this summer. One thing that he identified, and I took it as a compliment, is that you're actually one of the few organizations that holds. I'm not big on meetings. I'm to be honest with you, I'm not big on meetings. And when Chad and I have a meeting, I can call Chad and a couple of times a week rather than having a meeting and then just taking a moment and getting that done, rather than taking an hour of everybody's time or whatever it was, and just getting and chopping wood and getting things done. But he identified within our organization that we do have meetings where we hold people accountable, that we know what's going on, we know what's on, and now we do it a couple of times a week, just 20 minutes with the segment of our organization. And I tell you what, we lock the doors, we turn the open sign off, and we absolutely need to get everybody on the same sheet of music for our organization to go through or go forward. And I think that's gone a long ways. I mean,
I can tell you it's gone a long ways. I mean, the last 2-3 years, we've been really trying to focus on core values, culture, communication, that sort of thing. But we can get better. And all these things that we're doing aren't hard, right? And they're planned, they're scheduled, there's agenda. But I like what you said, and it's got my head just kind of spinning, is that recap, that meeting recap, that follow-up. That's almost more important than the meeting itself, because when we're in a room listening to a speaker, you probably know the percentages, right? Within the first 24 hours, you lose 50%. And then the next 24, whatever the numbers are, in the end, you remember 5 to 10% of what you actually heard verbally. But if it's communicated and reinforced within 24 hours or so, via, maybe in our organizations, it's Microsoft Teams. We just simply shoot a chat to everybody that was in the meeting saying, this is what I understood. This was everybody's, metrics and what we were taking ownership of. This is when we'll meet again. These are the results we desire. Boom. Now, if they don't remember, they can reflect on the written word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes back to the accountability as well. How can you truly hold somebody accountable if you just said, hey, I need you to get this done? That's where you write that down. You say, you put a deadline on it as well. It's essentially like a SMART goal. You can't just have a goal and say, oh, I hope to become a millionaire. Well, okay, cool. Well, you can become a millionaire in 50 years, or you can do it in 2 years. Which one did you want to do? Either way, you became it. But I guarantee if you became a millionaire in 2 years, you're going to be a lot more happy than if it took you 50 years. And so, same thing. How can you get mad at a team member when you ask them to get something done, but you don't put a deadline on that? And then you also don't actually send it in an email. That way you can make sure, because you can go back, hey, no, look, on this date, I said I needed it done by this date. Is it like, well, no, I mean, you told me it's due on December 1st, and you only gave me 2 days to do it, because you happened to remind them 2 days before it, even though you talked about it on November 1st. It's like, no, I give you a whole month, and now you have the email. And I hate to we have an email so we can go back and show that you're wrong and I'm right and everything like that. But that's how we can truly hold somebody accountable, is having that paper trail, which is really great communication at the end of the day. And of course, emails are probably the worst form of actual communication. But when it comes down to holding somebody accountable, it becomes very crystal clear. Like, hey, this wasn't an email. You did receive it, and this is the date you received it. And here's the date that we said you were supposed to be finished with it. That was the expectation. If you had an issue, you should have said something. And that really comes to trust, as you're, as being the leader, you have to have their trust as well, because there are plenty of people, and I've been guilty of that as being an employee at one point, that I didn't feel comfortable saying no. And so I said, okay, yeah, I'll try and get it done. And then the date comes up, and really, realistically, let's say that 30 days was not enough. I really needed 60 days. And so that's where the employee also needs to come back, but you as the leader need to build that trust. And sometimes that goes back to the over communicating. You say like, hey, is 30 days going to be enough for you? And if they say yes, then okay, hey, you said you could do it in 30 days. Boom. Here's the deadline. And they may say no. And that goes back to, they feel empowered. They feel ownership because, oh man, Kyle, Chad, they're actually asking me, what do I think? How long do I actually need for that? And you'll find most times that, well, you think, and it's scary as a leader, oh, they're gonna pad it and they're gonna say they need more time. They'll actually probably say they need less time. And I found a lot of times that's what people do. Or when they put that deadline, they may pad the deadline a little bit, but then they end up delivering faster, like a lot faster than if you tell them what the deadline is. And so that's another thing that you can do to help them be able to take that ownership and empower them is, hey, how long do you think this will take you? Okay, great. Let's, maybe even throw in there, hey, I'll go ahead and give you an extra day or two. I know things come up. We have emergencies sometimes. So we're going to add in a couple extra days for just in case. And they'll be like, wow, this is great. And they'll feel even better about it and feel less pressured and feel less micromanaged to get the job done.
Right. Yeah, I think just, again, that follow-up and just making sure everybody understands the expectation. We say things verbally, but then it kind of, we forget it because as soon as we turn around, we're distracted by something else, right? That makes communication easier and you avoid these conflicts. So that's so awesome. Kyle, do you have anything to wrap up? I know, Phillip, your time is valuable. You're a busy man. We're going to wrap it up quickly, but Kyle, you got anything there?
I want to just, Phillip, I need some help with public speaking. Can you give me a couple quick tactics that you would use to just kind of, what's your go-to public speaking rule number 1 and 2 that you have that we can use right away?
I say, yeah, the two biggest things is, one, what is your desired outcome when it comes to whatever you're going to communicate on, whether you be on stage, whether you're going to a meeting? What is that desired outcome or result that you're looking for? Think about that and then reverse engineer from there. And then also, who are you talking to is going to be the next big thing for you. So when you put these two things in mind as you go to speak, your communication is going to be a lot better. Because when I think about, okay, I'm going to have a hard conversation with a coworker, I'm going to be thinking about that a lot differently than, oh, I just need to give somebody some information. Because when I'm going in to have a hard conversation, now I think, okay, what are some things that maybe will be a conflict that they won't like? Are they going to have any kind of objections to what I say? How am I going to navigate this conversation? But if I just go into it like, oh, I'm just going to go talk to them about the issue. Yeah, good luck with that tough conversation going well. So really, like, what is your main objective, and then who are you talking to would be the two things I'd say would be really helpful. And just really think through what are some of your talking points within that can help you get to that end goal.
No, that's great, and that's something that we talked about recently. We talked about candor a little bit. Candor is just not about speaking up, and speaking your mind. Candor is actually being a little bit more on the eloquent side, because if you got a tough communication that you need to do and you need to get your point across, but you don't want to get people upset or whatever it may be, learning how to soften questions, and that type of thing. That's wonderful that we just don't come out. But yeah, those are things that we need to do as leaders within the organization and say, what is the outcome, right? And then articulate, how do I need to approach this?
Yeah, just one thought on that, and it made me think when you were saying, you might have to have the hard conversations or different audiences or whatever. Know your audience, but I think it was Ed Milet. You probably know this. He's one of the best speakers in the world, right? Because he can hit everybody's emotions. He said the number one thing is meet people where they are, and then rise from there and bring everybody up. So understanding your audience, knowing where they're at, whether it's a hard conversation, a celebratory conversation, meet them where they are, and then rise that tide from there. So, man, good stuff, brother. Where can people find you?
Right.
Phillip?
And you can find me at my website, speakingsessions.com, or the most active social media platform for me is Facebook. So facebook.com/the real Phillip Sessions.
The real
Right.
Phillip
Yeah.
Sessions,
Yeah.
because there's somebody else out there that wants to be him.
Yep,
Right.
exactly. They already had it, so I couldn't take it.
What kind of services do you offer, Phillip? And you have a
So
catchy you have a catchy name to your organization and a title. What's that called? Can you remind us again?
yeah, Speaking Sessions is the name.
Speaking
So
Sessions.
yeah, at the end of November, I will be launching a digital course, so you'll have access to that. And so my bread and butter, if you will, is really speech prep. And so that digital course, I've got a group coaching, the same thing, and one-on-one. Essentially, you get more of me, if you will, with that. But at the end of the day, those three different offers are essentially to help you be able to create a message and create a presentation that you can go take and speak on for 5 minutes, 15 minutes, or 50 minutes, or however long it needs to be, and be able to have whatever message you want and be able to speak to whatever audience you need to speak to, so you can manipulate that message. And that's what I do is help people learn how to craft a story, craft a message, and have a story within that will reach any audience over any message.
Excellent.
That's awesome. I will. Sorry, Kyle. I didn't mean to.
No, you're fine.
There, man. But I will. Full disclosure. I've hired Phillip to review some of my outlines. I tell you what, he took a presentation I was going to do with the time slot that I was allotted. He cut it in half and made some other tweaks, but it was kind of last minute. But I tell you what, without that, I would have been a rambling fool up there. And we are signed up for his digital course because as a leader, as a business owner, someone that wants to better communicate and articulate a message with my team and our team, as well as get on maybe not stages, because I'm not as rambunctious as Phillip is, or for some of these guys, but get in rooms and talk to folks and how we can serve them and make them better. So I'm looking forward to November when that's completed, man, so we can take a look at it. But if you got something from this message, please do this. Go and connect with Phillip out on social, Facebook especially. Check out his website, and be sure and share this message with your friends, family, colleagues that you have, because all of us, guaranteed, can learn to communicate better, and ultimately that will lead to a more productive and fruitful life, in my opinion, because it eliminates a lot of stress and uncertainty that comes with the lack of communication. So appreciate you guys tuning in to another episode of the KB article. Till next time.
We'll see you later. Thank you so much, Bill. Thanks for being with us.
Yeah, thank you.